would like to share and discuss with you about the conflict mapping and analysis. I would like to introduce the comprehensive framework to understanding the mapping conflict. And we can see that the 5 elements in the framework, and also the dynamic is the element. This framework is important to you to understand the conflict and how to prevent and giving recommendation for the conflict resolution. This is our objective for this session. Study about peace and conflict. It looks like health science. In health science, the method is the diagnosis, prognosis, and also the healing process. It is the same with our study in peace and conflict. The result of the diagnosis are recommendation, like for the medicine, and also for the healing process. And the healing process in conflict situation, we call is the conflict resolution. When I'm start in 2000 as a peace builder in Maluku, you know, it is in the early 2000, I found that several tools for the mapping conflict. Because when I'm going to Maluku, I need some tools to analyze the situation, to analyze the actor, to analyze the source of conflict. In 2000s, I found it 3 kinds of tools. It is the onion analogy, the conflict tree tools, and also conflicting party analysis. These tools to diagnose the conflict situation in the ground. We can see that one by one, the tools, because this is, it look like the background for our framework. With understand these tools, also it's easy for us to understand the dynamic framework. Let me start with the onion analogy. To understand the conflict, to understand about the situation, there is 3 layers in the onion analogy. The outer layer is the position. This one is to say about what we want. The position of, between the conflicting party. This is the position. The second layer is the interest, which is what we really want. But the deeper layer is needs, which what we should have. That is the important layer to understand. It is the need and interest, not the position. In one example from Chiapas model, you can see that this is the conflict. They call that the tenurial conflict or the land conflict between the state and with the group of indigenous people there. We can see that the position between the differences position between the state or the landlord or the businessman with the indigenous people. Indigenous people position, they really need to against militarization. They they say that they need the freedom, the equality in law. But in the businessman side and in the landlord position, they see that the group of the indigenous people, the Sebastian group, this the rebel group, it is the position. But the interest is in the indigenous people, they needed to redistribution of land, or they needed the businessman, the state, respect for the human right. But in the state position, they just need to control political and economic access, and also to control the cheap labor. That is the interest. We can see that the differences interest between the state and the indigenous people. But the need is look like the same. We can see that. The indigenous people needed the land, prosperity and justice. And also the businessman, the landlord, the employer need land also and the money. To see the common need between the conflicting party is very important. Not only to see the position or the interest, but needs of all of the conflicting party is important. This is one interest tool we call the union conflict analogy. Yeah, to make the differences between the position, the interest, and also need of the conflicting party. Okay, this is one example. The second tools that we have in 2000 early, it is conflict tree analysis or conflict tree analysis. In these tools, we can see that the relationship between the source of conflict, it is the root or structural cause of conflict, and the manifestation, the trunk of conflict, and also the dynamic or effect the conflict on the leaf. We can see that. We can divide it, the analysis between the root of conflict, the trunk, and also the dynamic or the effect of conflict. In the root of conflict, it is the structural factor of the source of conflict, the basic causes of conflict. But it is very difficult to influence in short period of time. If it is not resolved properly, then conflict will recur in the future. That is the source of conflict. It takes time to handle the structural factor like poverty, like social justice, or sometimes the corruption become the root of conflict. But we know that is the root causes of conflict. But the manifestation, it is important thing. The issue from conflicting party or the conflict topic, it is the real source of conflict. Can we negotiate with all of the conflicting party? And also, the third is dynamic factor. We call the causes of the conflict, like the torture, the killing, or also it is the effect of the conflict, like also the victim of the conflict. And it is important to see the root causes or structural factor, the manifestation factor, and also the dynamic or the effect of the conflict like that. We should divide our analysis into three factors. That is the lesson from the conflict tree tools. Okay, it is the second tool, the interest. And then also the last tools that we have in 2000, we call the conflict or actor map. Yeah, we can see that like this, yeah. This conflict or actor map, it is also the interested tools that we have in 2000. Is the map of conflict is similar to geographic map used to describe visualize of conflict. and to also to describe the actor and their power or influence on conflict, relationship with each other, and also the issues of conflict. This is the conflict or aftermath tools. We can see that this is how we can describe the conflict map. We can see that the relationship. We can see that the group of conflicting party also. And then in the conflict map, they have some legend. We can see that the legend. Yeah? Like the cycle describe the conflicting party, large or small. It is the strength of the the party. If we can see that the big cycle, it is meaning that the strong power of this conflicting party, of this group. If we can see that the drawing is the small cycle, it means that the small power of this conflicting party. And you can see that the straight line, it is the close relationship or tactical alliance. And double line, you can see that it is the strategic alliance. And then sign of cross, broken relationship between the parties. Half cycle, it is the third party. Wave, it is the hostility on dispute situation. It is the wave legend. And dot line, it is the gray relationship between parties. The dot line and arrow is influence over other, and zigzag, or sometimes we call the electricity. It is the describe the conflict situation, inconsistency, the conflict, sign of the describe the hot event. This is the topic for the people and the organization. With the symbol that can use, now we can understand about this relationship between the conflicting party. The wave legend meaning the hostility between the EFL and LERT, yeah, right? And then the dot line meaning the gray relationship between the party, yeah, and then also the alliance, the tactical alliance, and also that the strategic alliance. These pictures in one paper drawing about the relationship and the conflict situation between the conflicting party. This is the tools that we have in 2000. Let me analyze the tools and also my problem and my hardship in on the field when I'm start with the tree of tools in Maluku conflict. Existing conflict analysis are still partial and static. At that time in 2000, I just only, okay, maybe I can drawing the source of conflict with the perspective of conflict tree, just like that. This still partial and static. I don't see the relationship between the tools. That is the situation at that time. And also, I'm analyzed that the lack of the link between source of conflict and actor inflow. We cannot see the dynamic and the relationship in that the situation. What is the effect of the actor to the escalation? It looks like lack. I see the lack and to see the link between the source of conflict. In that situation, in Maluku conflict, the phenomena is very complex and very emotional. and also the escalation of the conflict is very high. And then it looks like changes the source of conflict every time. It is sometimes it is the economic problem or justice problem or anything. It looks like the transformation of the source of conflict. It is very complex, spatial for ethnic and also the religion conflict nuance. It's very complex phenomenon. That's why we needed the dynamic framework. We needed the comprehensive framework. That's why in 2000, I tried to unity all the tools become one tools. We call that the dynamic framework. This one, our tools to see the source conflict, to see the actor, to see also in one framework, in one picture, in the dynamic. We can see that the main component is the escalation, conflict factor, conflict actors, stakeholders, and the government political will. We can see that one by one and carefully all of the elements. The first element is escalation, and the escalation, the first one, we should detect the escalation and the escalation of the conflict first. And then the second is the factor. If you see that, it look like we can make the conflict tree tools to see the structural root causes of conflict, accelerator, and the trigger of the conflict. This is the factor. And the third element is the actor. We can divide it, the actor conflict become the group of the provocator and also the group of vulnerable group who have effect from the provocator, and also the functional actor, the group of functional actor. This is the state, the policeman, or also. And then the fourth element for dynamic framework, we said stakeholders for the conflict. This is also the actor who concerned on also who committed to find the solution of conflict, like the government, the police, the military, the religious leaders, traditional leaders, business, mass media, NGO, and also the university. University is in that position become the stakeholder, the actor who involved and concerned for conflict resolution and peace building process. And the fifth element is the political will from the government. This is important. And we can see that one by one, the dynamic of the framework. Sometimes conflict starting with the dispute or with the tension and mobilization in the escalation process. If we cannot handle the tension and the mobilization of the conflict, and then the conflict become bigger, and then we call the conflict building. But if we handle the dispute, the tension, the mobilization, or the violence, we call is the escalation, and then maybe we can see that the peace building process. It is the first element, but the dynamic is not easy like that, because still we should analyze the factor of the conflict. It is the second element. Still conflict, they have the trigger, they have the accelerator, and also they have the structural of root causes conflict. And also, we can see that the vulnerable group, sometimes vulnerable group become the trigger, and then the conflict escalate again. Sometimes problem in the stakeholder, they don't have the coordination. We have become from the stakeholder with the functional actor, and then the vulnerable group mobilize again, become the trigger, and then the escalation become bigger and bigger. Also, sometimes conflict starting with the political will from the government. The government sometimes we call is more pro-conflict, no, not pro resolution of conflict. But the government sometimes become part of the problem, not part of the solution. That's why also we should analyze the political will from the government. With the comprehensive analysis for the fifth element, the result is maybe we can understand about the conflict. If you see that, it looks like the stethoscope for the medical science. Yeah, the escalation is look like check the eye, check the breath, or check, or like to diagnosis all of the element of our body in the medical science. This is our dynamic framework. And then from the tools, from the framework, it is the framework, we have 4 tools now. We have the new tools for the conflict. We call the history of conflict or chronological of conflict, the source of conflict, the actor involved, and also peace process. Let me show you one by one our tools. This is the first element in our framework. It is also the basic for the chronology of conflict or the history of conflict, like this, yeah? It is the conflict escalation. Conflict escalation start with the dispute. We give the situation become the number 1 situation, yeah? The dispute. If we cannot handle dispute, and the dispute become the tension and mobilization. If we cannot handle the tension and mobilization, become the crisis. The crisis. Maybe the government was confused, the religious leader become confused or something like that. It is the crisis situation. And then if we cannot handle the crisis, become the limited violence and become the mass violence or war. It is the 100 people become the victim, dying, all of the infrastructure was damaged or anything. This is the mass violent situation. This one, number 1, it is the dispute situation. Now, number 2 is the tension and mobilization. 3 layer is the crisis situation. 4 is the limited violence. And then 5 in the mass violent situation. After the mass violence, maybe we can find the resolution, conducting the escalation process with ceasefire, reconciliation, or peace building sometimes. Chronology of conflict, the modality for the history of conflict, the conflict escalation and the escalation of conflict in period of time. That is the reason behind the history of conflict. And then you can see that the history of conflict in Afghanistan, because I give some example. it is a really true example because I read it this to preparing the peace process in Afghanistan before to make the history. Just to give the background or the context, the population of the Afghanistan, the language, the religion in Afghanistan. 2011, that I'm start with the Afghanistan peace process. We can see that it is the history, but this is, I'm drawing this story in 2018, but before, you see that when I'm start with the process of peace building in Afghanistan, I'm drawing the story from 200 years conflict in Afghanistan. It's very complicated at the first time. I tried to make the history more useful because at that time it's not really useful. I'm very complicated with the history, but I know the chronology, the story, very long history. But I lost the concept to see the possibility on the future with the long history like that. That's why I changed the story, become more short, just only 15 years. It is more useful now. It is more appropriate now to see the dynamic of conflict in Afghanistan. You can see that conflict situation in Afghanistan at the time. This starting where in 1970, where the monarchy fell, established of the Republic of Afghanistan at the time. But the conflict in that situation with the limited violence, 100 people was dying when in the South Revolution, in the communist coming, when the invention from the Soviet Union. This the invention, the Soviet Union in 1978. And then also conflict become bigger and bigger. Also when US coming to support the Mujahideen. It is 1986. But the conflict was decreased and also the escalation was decreased when in 1988 in the Geneva Accord, when the UN also support, as Germany support the European and also UN support the peace process. And then in 1962, when Burhanuddin Rabbani became a president. But the conflict, we can see that become bigger and become the most violent in the Taliban era. In the, we call the civilian war in Afghanistan. It is in the 1966 when the Taliban take control of the Kabul and also become the civil war. And then they have also bond agreement in 2001, UN security as a assistance. The Loyar Jirga was created. It is look like the parliament in Afghanistan, and Hamid Karzai become the president. But also the tension become the conflict also become the escalate when at the time when US sent the troop fight with the ISIS in the Afghanistan, and then also Ashraf Ghani become the president. And see that this is the history of conflict. We can see that the escalation and the escalation of conflict, the violent period, and then also the peace process, the peace period. It is very important to understand about the story before and also to create the resolution. We can learn from the history of conflict. That's why the tools of history of conflict is very, very important. Very important. It is the first tools that we have from dynamic framework. The second tools, we can see that the source of conflict. We should, in the dynamic framework, we just divided the source of conflict, become three kind of layered. There is the structural, it is the root causes, the accelerator. The accelerator is the factor always accelerate the situation. Like in our situation now, distortion of information, the hoax, or the issue of religion, the issue of ethnicity, sometimes become the accelerator of conflict. And also the trigger. In Maluku, I give the analogy, the structural root causes is the gray of the gray, yeah? The accelerator, it is the wind. And the trigger, it is the fire. Sometimes the forest fire, just the trigger is only just small, the trigger, but depend on the accelerator and also the structural causes of conflict. Let me show you why the source of conflict in Afghanistan like this. Let me show you the problem of Afghanistan. Yeah? When I'm started in 2005, from 2009, the distribution map of the EID. It is, we call the EID or improvised explosive device, or we call sometimes the bomb homemade. From 2009 until 2011, we can see that Taliban was create the EID in all of Afghanistan. It is for 10 years. We can see that in the red. This is the EID map in all of the Afghanistan. We can see that homemade bomb in all of the Afghanistan. This is also because you can see that the red one is controlled by Taliban. The government just control in the center, in Kabul or something. In the white was controlled by the government. But the red is the conflicting area. Also in the gray is controlled by the Taliban. It is the Taliban control. We can see that the map of Afghanistan. We can see that the ISIS in the border in Pakistan. We can see that ISIS stay here in the Kunar and Peshawar. It is the ISIS area. The government cannot control of the area of Afghanistan because the half of Afghanistan is controlled by the Taliban. It is in 2011 until 2018. It is the map of Afghanistan. The trigger of the conflict in Afghanistan is the state failure. This state failure become the trigger. That's why the conflict is getting worse. But the accelerator is the international forces. America is coming. UN is coming. All of the European countries coming. It has become the accelerator of conflict. But the root causes conflict is we call the ethnic division, religion issues, trust issue, neighborhood country, radical resistance, poverty, education. In the resolution conflict, we cannot handling the long causes of conflict like this. but we can handle the trigger, the accelerator at the first time. That is very important to see the resolution, the trigger and also the accelerator. But the structural root causes conflict takes time. It's long time process to handle it. But we can handle the trigger, the accelerator. That's why it's very important to see or to describe the source of conflict, to see the resolution. Okay, these are the second tools for dynamic framework. Third tool is the actor, the actor map, the actor of the conflict. Let me describe how to analyze the actor map of the conflict, or the third of our tools. The first one, to see the actor, you should identification of the actor involved in conflict. Like the stakeholder, the group of, we call the provocator. The provocator, but I get the definition for provocator, the actor who have the abnormal thinking about the situation, the abnormal analysis of the situation. It is the provocator. Yeah, the vulnerables group, it is the group of very vulnerable, easy to push this group, to mobilize this group, also to make the group become the tension, become the group of vulnerables. And then the third one, I see the group of functional actors, the group of stakeholders. We should identify all of the actors involved. And then the second, to see the source of the actor power, the power of actor, because we agree at the first time, the more bigger the cycle, more bigger the power of the actor. That's why we should also identify the actor power. The actor power coming from the personally, from economic, and also from politics. If the actor is the head of the political party, also he is the rich man in the country, and also they have the networking between the state, it means that the actor is very powerful, and you should describe become the bigger cycle, the big cycle, because they have the political influence, they have the economic influence, also they have the personal influence or sociological influence. That is important to identify the source of actor power is very important. And then also we should identify also the relationship between the actor in conflict. But in the dynamic framework, I'm just only describe five relationship between the actor: strategic alliance, tactical alliance, the gray situation, and then the hostility, it is with the wave, and the conflict. We can see that in the strategic alliance. Yeah, let me explain first the situation in conflict or the conflict situation. In all field of the conflict, sometimes the situation is look like the gray situation. Sometimes it is the conflict situation. Sometimes it is the hostility situation. But starting sometimes from the gray situation. If we the conflicting parties try to give the contribution, and then they able to cooperation, we can say that it is in the tactical alliance relation. The legend is like this. This is the legend for the tactical alliance. And then after cooperation, the conflicting party become more coordination and also collaboration. The coordination and collaboration situation, it is we call the strategic alliance relationship. This the situation. Hostility and denial situation for the hostility situation, and the conflict after the hostility, it is the conflict. And then we can see that the actor mapping. It is in 2018 when in the second meeting in the process. But in the first meeting, I'm drawing the actor mapping is like this. It is in 2011. Very complicated actor at that time. The international factor, the Taliban, the Republic, the government, the Iran's group, the Russian group, the Unit Emirate group. It's very complicated, the actor. But after 10 years, I tried to, it is in 2018, the relationship actor is become more simple. We can see that the US and Taliban, it is conflicting this relation. Also the government with the Taliban. But Taliban have a strong relationship with Pakistan. US have strong relationship with the Arab Saudi. But UN is just only tactical alliance. China also with the government. Iran, India, Russia, and Nahdlatul Ulama Indonesia. Because I'm part of the Nahdlatul Ulama Indonesia when I'm facilitate the process resolution conflict in Afghanistan. That is the actor mapping. And then the last is peace process. Like peace process makes step of the conflict resolution. Cessation of hostility, ceasefire, peacefire, humanitarian pause, negotiation process, mediation process. That is the 4 tools of our framework. Framework in one picture is like this. This is the 5th element of dynamic framework for conflict resolution. But really, when I'm start in Maluku and also in Afghanistan, the elements still 3 of element. But after 10 years, become 5th the element. I found the element one by one. But now this is become the framework, the solid framework. We call the dynamic framework for conflict prevention and peace. I'm writing this, the framework. Okay, this is the tools for mapping, conflict mapping and analysis of the conflict. as long as my experience, I implement this framework for the land conflict, for the agrarian conflict, for the political party conflict. I think it is able to you to make this framework to all this thing of conflict. Of course, you should also to see the context and also the complexity of the conflict. But the fifth element, it's work to analyze at the first time, to diagnose the disease and also to see the medicine and the healing process. There is so many actors in Papua. I see also in the southern Thailand, but it's quite different with Aceh. Aceh, they have GAM with very strong organization with a strong leader. That's why we can make the negotiation with the head of the Aceh Merdeka movement. But in the Papua, you can see that so many actors, internally and internationally. They're also in another country of Papua. That's why you should analyze the strongest actor, the actor who has a strong influence to make the escalation and the escalation. The actor, you see that not only for the conflict, but also for the resolution. You can see that. And then it is very important. But the process, you see that in the dynamic framework, provocateur group have a strong relationship with the vulnerables group. And the vulnerables group cannot hear the sound from the functional actor. They just only hear and also follow the group of provocateur. That's why the functional actor always fail to cut the relationship between the provocateur and vulnerables group. And vulnerables group become the trigger again, and the escalation is bigger. It is the situation also in Papua. More accelerator of conflict, more people to accelerate the conflict, more vulnerable group become the trigger also to vulnerable group, become tension and mobilization easy for the vulnerable group, and the escalation is bigger and bigger. That is for the Papua conflict. It's not so easy to see the actor in Papua. You should careful to analyze the actor who has influence to find the solution and also to make the conflict become bigger. The tools is really sometimes beautiful, but lack of more static tools for me, because I'm always making tools in all of the my process in mediate as a mediator or negotiator of conflict. Always lost the dynamic between all of the elements like that. That's why I try to create the tools become one picture, become one framework, and also to see the dynamic between, we call the factor and actor. I just want to see how the actor influence the factor, and the factor become the triggering to the actor like this. That's why for me, as long as my experience, the tool sometimes is okay. We can make it to something like, but still static. stay static like this. But the conflict situation is very dynamic. The transformation of the source of conflict was dynamic from time to time. That's why we needed the dynamic tools or the dynamic framework, but also in one picture. For my suggestion, maybe we can try to make maybe just to experiment it, our tools to see the Southeast Asian conflict. It look like maybe we can make 2 tools or 3 tools to see the effectiveness.
Basically, there are a lot of tools, for mapping and analysis. And this is from chapter 4 from our book on peace and conflict transformation in Southeast Asia. And in this figure 4.1, I think this is on page 101 in the book, you can see that there are a few tools that can be useful, and this is how we have visualized conflict analysis. There are a lot of tools that you can use, and the tools that we use usually depends on the context of the conflict situation and on what we are focusing on at that particular moment in time for that particular conflict. Okay, so for example, you can look at the actors and relationship mapping. Who are the actors, how they relate to each other, whether one actor and which actors actually either support or not supporting the other actors. And then we also have positions, mapping out the positions, the interests, the needs, the fears, identifying what are some of those interests, needs, and fears. And this map, I always find this useful, especially if we are looking at designing a peace process, because we want to look at the positions and interests and to see whether what is being presented is really what they really want or not. And then we always also try to look for overlapping needs, overlapping interests, and we can use that as a starting point for the peace process. Okay, so this particular map is useful for that. And then we have also other maps, the drivers of conflict, triggers, the accelerators. We can specifically just map on these things. And then narratives of conflict, the timeline has been mentioned. Look at the throughout history, what has happened throughout history. And then taking into account that there are different narratives depending on who you talk to and which parties are being focused on, and also your own narrative might be different from the other narratives. And then the context, what are the context surrounding the particular conflict situation. So you have all these tools, and then you also have the conflict tree. We also have the onions, we have the nested model, we have quite a few tools. So our I think responsibility as peace educators, because we want to teach not only students but also in many situations actors in conflict and also policy makers, we need to understand all these tools. Whether we use them or not will depend on that particular context. Will depend on particular context, and we have to also, be aware, that there is no one size fits all, in terms of conflict, because even if the conflict all have generic ingredients to it, each conflict is different. So because each conflict is different, the way that we approach the conflict, can and should be different as well. But these kind of tools, they are useful for us, to start begin the process of analyzing the conflict situation. So as peace educators, I would say learn all these tools and then expose the tools to our students, and then let them decide which tools will be most useful in a particular conflict situation. You cannot put everything in a particular framework, so you have to take that with some pinch of salt and to elaborate on some of these points yourself. Some conflict situations, they are clear-cut. You have actor A, actor B, they are fighting with each other, and then the issues are clear, their positions are clear, it's easy. But then there are also many, many cases that, you know, we will have difficulties if we want to properly map and analyze these conflict situations. You know, I would say that all the conflicts are complex, a lot of complexities. The most difficult one would be Myanmar, for example, because you have so many issues there. You have the issues of, you know, the government with the people, the government with the former government. You have the different ethnic armed groups fighting the government. You have the, you know, you have the situation of the Rohingya. You have all sort of things. So if you want to look at Myanmar as a whole and draw one particular map, I think that will be impossible.
Yeah, impossible.
Impossible. So you need to then break down into the complex conflict into something more manageable and focusing on what is it that you intend to not only look at, you know, but to manage or resolve or transform, and then go into the different, you know, the different stages or the different types.
The reason behind the triangle also we make, yeah, like yeah, ABC, like attitude, we cannot see the attitude. B, behavior, it is directly, we can see that it is, and also the contradiction, but it is yeah, we cannot see the situation. That's I think the reason behind the conflict is not only like this, yeah, not only find the trigger, but also we should analyze the accelerator and the structure of the root, like the conflict tree also, to see the root, the trunk, and also the leaf. It is important, yeah. That's why the reason behind the ABC triangle is important. Also, we make this the reason, the dynamic reason for this. Like also in the union, not only to see the position, but important thing is to see the need and also the interest. Like we learn from the ABC triangle also about the dimension of the conflict. I learned also the attitude process, the contradiction, and also the direct violence from Galtung. Then I can make this in also to find in the process of our framework. The reason is very important from the ABC.
Conflict is never really in isolation by itself. And I just want to share with you nested model of conflict. First, you know, written by a scholar by the name of Mary Dugan in her article, and she basically looked at a conflict, you know, looking at a conflict as something that happens within a particular system. So it's never something which is isolated. It is always connected to other things. So, for example, you know, a conflict, you know, you can have the issues. Okay, you focus on the particular issues, and then the issues are actually within a wider circle of relations between the actors or the parties that are involved. So you have the relations between the parties, and then the relations are within a particular subsystem, and that subsystem can be that environment, the context of that particular conflict within that particular either school or region or province or whatever you want to have as a subsystem. And then it is also within the context of a larger structure, which is the system. So, for example, a conflict like Papua, for example, it has to do with issues within Papua. It has to do with the history of the conflict, the issues that have caused the different groups to be in conflict in Papua. It also depends on the relations between the actors, between the Papuans and also Jakarta, and how the evolution of the relations between the actors. And then it also has to do within the the structure of the Papuan society, because in Papua, you have the, you have the Papuans, you have the, the Indonesians, from other areas there, and then you have that local provincial politics within Papua. And at the same time, you also have, a larger system, which is Indonesia, because you have Papua being a province in Indonesia, and, the need for NKRI, for example, Negara Kesatuan Republik Indonesia, that they don't want an area to be separated from the whole country. And then you can even have the international system here. So just to show that, the structure of a conflict is actually related to a wider things, a wider, wider context. This is important because, when we do the mapping, it also gives us the opportunity to look at our own capacity and where we can properly address a particular situation. Do we want to focus on the issues? Do we want to focus on the relations? Or do we want to focus on the subsystem and system? Taking into account that resolving one particular aspect of a conflict will not necessarily resolve the conflict if the other, levels within this nest are not also properly addressed. So, for example, we can address the relations of the conflict actors, but then if we do not address the issues, the conflict will not be resolved. If we do not address the system, the system, the whole political situation of the country, it will also not be, we will also not be able to resolve the conflict. But it depends on who we are and what is our capacity. So this is a good article to read. It's from 1996. Professor Dugan actually, focus on which aspect, that she can properly concentrate on and have an impact, because usually we have to choose, which angle. And I like having this kind of model because it simplifies things to a level, that we can easily, put it on the board, and then we can make a few steps back and then try to figure out properly, how to go about doing these things. With all the knowledge that we have to simplify things and to put it, in smaller boxes, and to tackle things, maybe one aspect at a time, but thinking at the same time that is also connected to larger things, but to simplify things. Now what is actually mapping and analysis, and what is mapping all about, and how it can and should be used as a preliminary step towards trying to find solution to the problem that we are facing. As peace educators, we have to convey to our students, to our participants, what mapping and analysis is all about. And it's mostly common sense, if you ask me, but then we have to put it in a particular structure for them to understand better,